KFUG Community Radio, 1032 the time. You don't have to stop talking. I like that kind of community radio noise in the background sort of thing. Exactly. 1032 the time. As I said, Paul Critz with you, community service. It is election season, and in the spirit of that season, we've been talking to as many people as we can who are running for Board of Supervisors. And there's 7 of them this year. We are joined live in the studio, Jessica Cejnar from the Rivers Outpost, and Kevin Hendrick, candidate District 5 for the Board of Supervisors. How are you doing this morning, Kevin?
I'm doing good.
Go ahead and take a swig of water. Get it all warmed up.
Yeah, good morning.
So what are you up to today? We're just starting light. What's your day like today? How much campaigning things you have going on?
Well, this morning I'm here. I'm excited to be on the radio with you today. This afternoon I'll be working with some volunteers that are calling voters. So we have a phone bank set up. I'm being endorsed by the operating engineers, and they have a whole political mechanism, so they help set up a phone bank. It's a very slick online phone banking system. So I've got volunteers calling.
Is this a Democratic thing here locally, the phone bank? Just using the phone bank, and is it still? I was wondering. I went to a meeting at the Democrats after the 2016 election, and they were talking about the phone banks. Is that still an effective thing in Delaware County to get the word out?
Well, there's 2 phases to it. One is making initial contact, and the key is identify the voters, people that say they will vote for you, and that starts building up a list of identified voters that say yes, they'll support Kevin.
I have absolute, just horrible buzzing coming out of that microphone. Let me have you scoot in a little closer. We got to get under the shield here. Yeah, that's wow. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can fix this. This is very frustrating. That's better. Okay, good.
Yeah, as I was saying, the first part is identifying the voters. The last part of phone banking is making sure that those voters turn out. So when we identify absentee voters, vote by mail people, following up in the last week and making sure that they remember to turn them in. And then poll watching, which is showing up at the 3 voting locations in my district, 3 voting locations. And then as people vote, they scratch their names off the list, so you can go in a couple times a day and see who hasn't yet voted. Then you look for the people that are that haven't voted and remind them, offer a ride, whatever it takes.
Now, what does this look like in your district? Because your district is pretty spread out.
It's very spread out.
Yeah, well, I feel like districts 3, 4, and 5 are the ones that are like, they cover the most geographical ground anyway.
Yeah, I don't want to say I'm envious, but for some of the other districts where you have street next to each other, they're all straight, and voter. I was in Klamath a couple weekends ago, and I parked my vehicle, and then I was walking, trying to find, in some places there's no addresses. You know the address you're looking for because you have a voter list to look at, and walking up hills, dodging dogs, getting past gates.
It's a long walk back to the Glen too, isn't it?
It is definitely a long walk.
Well, the Glen is the hot spot in Klamath because it's houses next to each other.
Yeah,
and I said, okay, you 2 work the Glen and door, and then I'll do the hinterlands and walk the hills and try to find the voters. In some cases, I had to knock on doors saying, is this address? And it's like, no, that's the one up there. Or one guy said, no, she's up the hill, but I'll take it to her.
That's handy.
I know. Everybody was very friendly.
So let me start with the basic sort of question I like to start with everyone is why in the world, whatever possessed you to want to be on the Board of Supervisors and undertake a campaign?
Well, there's a couple reasons. One is that I retired from my job at the Solid Waste Authority 6 years ago, and I've been working as a consultant since then. So I work at home predominantly. I'm actually managing grant programs in Washington State. So twice a year I make trips up there to meet with grantees. I'm a grant manager. So I have a very flexible schedule. But primarily it's because I have the time and because I want to give back to the community that's been so good for me. I mean, I had an excellent job for 20 years. It allows me to buy a house, raise my children. They've grown and gotten their college education and moved on to their careers. And so I have time. That's one reason. I am able to, and I want to give back. And the second is, I think there should be a choice. voters should have a choice. It's not a good sign for democracy when there's only one person running. So I think I respect everybody who steps up, everybody who says they want to do it, because it's a really hard job. And when I win, I'll have to work even harder than I'm working on my campaign. But I think it is a good sign for our democracy that people have a choice. And I'm providing an alternative to Bob.
In your campaigning, you said that you've gotten you've probably knocked on doors. That's what a lot of candidates have been doing, and spoken with a lot of people. What is one of the things that you think you learned the most about your district that maybe you didn't know before you started this?
I've learned a lot about Klamath that I wasn't aware of before. They generally feel overlooked,
Yes.
and underserved. I made a point of meeting with the president of the Klamath Chamber of Commerce. I learned a lot from him, and including the fact that the Klamath Chamber of Commerce is fairly small, fairly low funding, and he would love to see, and I think it would be appropriate to see more collaboration between the Crescent City Del Norte Chamber, which I think it's something like $200,000 from the county. They have a massive and I think good outreach program. But he said the last booklet that they put out, it had a listing for the Klamath Chamber of Commerce, but no phone number.
Wow.
Mistakes happen.
Yeah, but still, that seems like a mistake somebody would be on guard.
That's
be
a
on watch
pretty
for,
glaring
because-
omission. It seems like. to
And
me.
Klamath historically, is overlooked and looks up at us and up here and says,
I think of Klamath as, since I helped defeat the State of Jefferson movement, I ran that campaign however many years ago,
2014,
I think. Thank you. My mission since then has been being engaged with the state party and state politics, and helping to raise consciousness with urban legislators about rural issues. I mean, it's a similar kind of thing. The Jeffersons were saying, "Oh, those people in LA hate us," and I said, honestly, they don't even think about you. I lived there for 8 years, and nobody said, "Oh, that Del Norte, let's just screw them." They don't think about it. It's the same kind of thing. You can't blame people for not knowing if you're not willing to step up and say, "Here are our issues," and not only here are the issues and demand something, but say, "Here are the solutions I'd suggest, and can we work together on that?" So it's the same with I think with Klamath, is raising awareness to the issues. And for me, because I talk too much, listening is something I've been practicing a lot. The second thing that he mentioned, which is very valid and has sort of been a generic item on my list of things to improve, is affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. Because the internet in Klamath is not great, and if you have a business, how could you operate without internet?
Sure. I mean, this is something that, I remember Finnegan talking, all around high-speed internet and how great it was, and getting T1 lines into the county and things like that. I have not ever perceived from an end user sort of standpoint, any kind of change to internet up here, since it's cable-based internet. High-speed internet, it seems to be something everybody brings up and talks about, but is it even possible? Is the infrastructure here? Is it?
I think in Crescent City, in our area, it's good. It's fine. As I mentioned earlier, I'm working as a consultant. I work at home. I put out RFPs for grant applications. I receive them by internet. I've been working for 6 years as a consultant. I can only think of a couple days when internet hasn't been on. But in Klamath, it's way more spotty, and honestly, I have not made promises I can't keep. You have to recognize the problem, you have to identify the problem, and then you have to commit to try to solve it, which doesn't mean it's going to happen fast or that it can happen absolutely, but it is a need. And you ask me, what have I learned? What I've learned is that across the board, the people, and I had an event at the Requa Inn last Sunday, and as a result of our knocking on doors and personally inviting people to come to that, people showed up. And there I learned that the senior services in Klamath are not as well funded as the senior services here. The recreational services, which are county programs, are not well funded in Klamath as much as they're funded in the northern part of the district.
Why is that, though? Is that because of, is there a lack of will? Is it a lack of, I mean, funding is one thing, but is there
where does the tribe fit in? Where does the Yurok tribe fit in the Rezaghini Rancheria? I mean, those are two big, maybe the Rezaghini Rancheria not so much, but the tribe is a huge influence in Klamath.
Yeah, and it's an excellent point. I'm running as the for Board of Supervisors, so
Sure.
I focus on what can the supervisors do. But one of those things is that I think that the county can work well with the tribes, not only in Klamath, the Yurok tribe, but also earlier this week I had a meeting with the Elk Valley Rancheria. And the opportunities are there to collaborate. The tribes can get sources of money that the county can't get, and vice
Right.
versa. And if there's a common purpose, the county is pursuing funding, and the tribe is pursuing funding, then it's just a matter of collaborating, not working separately, but working together. I understand that there is a park in Klamath that was county-owned, and they're planning on turning that over to the Yuroks so that they can use their resources to maintain it. And that's fine. Now, why does that funding not flow? I don't know yet. I just know that that's their perception. And those are the kinds of things that I have learned.
I think it's interesting that you're taking sort of the dynamic that Del Norte has to take at large with its relationship with the rest of the state, just sort of like lobbying, championing, bringing awareness to our very existence to Sacramento. That it's also the same dynamic from Klamath to Crescent City.
Yeah, I've realized that just as I've been talking to people, that is because it doesn't solve the problem to blame people for not paying attention. Although, yeah, I guess that's what elections are about. It's more about
good point.
you know the other guy.
Every 4 years you can do that.
Yeah,
the rest
other
of the
guy.
time, yeah.
But listening and hearing what people say is the first step. I've already been tested in not overpromising blight, ongoing. There's blighted properties in Klamath, property, and these are poor people. They can't fix up their house. They don't have the money to clean up. And there's some things that can be done with community involvement and volunteers, and that's one way to go. But when it gets down to enforcement, code enforcement, I've been on that side of it when I worked for Solid Waste Authority. There's pieces of property that it would cost more to clean up than the property value.
Right.
So it doesn't pay to put a lien on a property that exceeds the value of the property. There's almost no chance of getting money. So there's some problems that are really hard, and they're ongoing, and they will be hard to fix on a short term.
You are tuned to KFUG Community Radio, 14 minutes shy of 11 a.m. We're sitting down, Jessica Cejnar from the Wild Rivers Outpost, and myself, Paul Critz, sitting down with Kevin Hendrick, candidate for District 5, Board of Supervisors here in Del Norte County. Now, we've talked for the first 15 minutes of this about the southern half of your district, the largest district in the county, I think. Have you seen just physically? Anyway.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You know,
What
if you look at other districts that
District 3 is fairly
And goes
large.
back
it
inland,
goes all the way
yeah.
to the Oregon border.
But so what about up here? We're sitting in District 5 here, right here in as you know the I refer to Elk Valley as the heart of Crescent City's meth district, and there's lots going on up here. The Birch Tract, all sorts of things to keep. What are the issues that you found going door to door up here in our neck of the woods?
Well, I think there's a general feeling that the progress of the Board of Supervisors has been disrupted and polarized by political conversations that don't necessarily provide any improvements or services to the people, and which is why my campaign slogan is "People over Politics," because arguing about political ideology, wasting hours at the Board of Supervisors distracts resources. People don't realize that if you're asking staff to work on something they don't have that time to work on something else.
Right.
So I've put a list of priorities together that I think are needed, and I'm getting good response on that. Number one is developing more affordable housing. And, yep, that's the response I get. You can't
Yeah.
see their heads nodding,
Yeah,
but that's
no,
the
that's
response I get.
Huge problem.
And not only...
Does the Board of Supervisors or a supervisor have any traction in regard to that, or is it all market-driven here? What can you do on the board to facilitate that?
That's an excellent question. First of all, identify the issue. It's a known issue, and it will help to solve the homeless problem, but there are working people that don't have places to live, that can't afford rent. I heard a story from a friend of mine who works for the Park Service, and she was trying to hire people. They couldn't move here because they couldn't afford to
Right.
rent here.
Right.
That surprised me. I mean, frankly, that surprised me that level of working person could not afford it.
Well, because it's not that it's too expensive, it's just not out there.
Yeah. So here's one idea that I'm really attracted to. The technical term is auxiliary housing units.
Secondary housing units.
The specific
Yeah.
idea, and what I like to call them, is backyard cottages.
Okay.
So
Old mother-in-laws,
instead of building, yeah, I'm moving away from that phrase.
Yeah, I know. That's
I live in one of those.
Somebody said when I was talking to, they said, "Oh, mother-in-laws were banned in this state." I go, "What?" Mother-in-laws, I think, are still allowed to be here, but we're talking about cottages,
Yeah.
backyard cottages. And the advantage of that is that you have people with property that have space. There have to be rules, setbacks, and all of that. But you can drop in these small houses, these cottages. You hook them up to the existing water and sewer, so it's not an infrastructure issue. They basically tap into the house.
Yeah.
It doesn't require a big government structure, which is probably needed also. And I know the county's looking at some sort of large affordable housing. But this is something that's a fairly low-cost option where the property owner benefits because now they're adding value to the property, they're gaining rental income. The state is looking at new laws that will ease up the burden to make it easier to permit, cheaper to permit. I've talked to the planners at the planning counter. The county has protocol for being able to do that.
And the high school has a program that actually builds.
So there's multiple layers
Yeah,
of this because you start setting this goal, then you can have training programs, not only with the high school, but College of the Redwoods has a carpentry program. And so these are training opportunities for our youth to learn how to do construction. It's building business opportunities for construction companies. And there's ways to streamline the permitting. In one of the cities that's looking at this, they have 3 pre-approved architectural plans.
Oh, wow,
for
okay.
buildings, so you're not coming into the planning counter with something that's not defined.
It has to
or
be
known.
looked at, in detail.
And
Sure, that
so
makes sense.
if you develop these 3, just say, for example, 3 pre-approved plans, you go to the county and you say, I'm going to build Plan A. They know what it looks like. They know what all the plumbing, what all the electricity, what the whole design is set up. They stamp it and move on.
Is that having a tiny cottage in the backyard, though? Is that a way to attract, say, new teachers and doctors to the county, or park rangers who want to move locally here? Is that, or is it a stopgap thing? I mean, does it free up? I'm trying to just.
The thing that I learned working for the Solid Waste Authority is there's a tendency for people to want to take complicated issues and find one solution.
Yeah, good point.
There never is.
Yeah.
And so you have to, and it's almost meaningless to say, I want more affordable housing, unless you're going to identify specific things that can happen. You ask, is that something government can do? Well, that's a small government opportunity. That doesn't require the county government to do very much other than stay out of the way.
You're right.
And not make it hard or not make it expensive. There's a structure, I think it might be a business in San Francisco that is gathering the capital so that if you're the homeowner that wants to develop a backyard cottage, that they will help finance it.
Wow.
Because there's people that are property rich but cash poor. So then they partner with the property owner to develop the cottage. They screen the renters, they manage the renters. And so you have a professional company that can do multiple of these units. That's a private enterprise. That's not a government enterprise.
Yeah, but the government can
And
get
so
out of
so
their
many
way
steps
and
of
allow
that.
it. Yeah.
The second idea that I've heard of.
This is the second on the list after affordable housing. Are we
Well,
still
no,
going
this
down
is
that, or-
also related to affordable
We're still-
housing
okay.
because it's as you just pointed out, that's only one thing. And some people, a lot of people, I mean, yuppies, or if there's still such a thing,
Is that- yeah.
are attracted to small houses, tiny houses. It's a thing.
Yeah.
You know, people are living simple as a way to save the planet. So it's not. I don't think it is eliminates any category of humans that want housing. I mean, it's a low-cost option for people that are low income. It's a practical option for people that are new. It's an option for youth that need housing. It's an option for seniors.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other option, this is still related to affordable housing or housing in general, is the Area 1 Agency on Aging is doing a pilot program in Humboldt County called Home Share, where they're working with seniors. For lack of better terms, I'm going to call them older seniors and younger seniors. I'm a younger senior.
No, I get you. I see what I see. Yeah.
These are people that have houses that perhaps their spouse has passed or their family is gone, and they have this big house that has space. So what they're doing in this pilot program, it's called Home Share, is they will screen possible tenants, and they're mainly focusing on seniors, so that's why I'm putting it all in the category of seniors. And they're matching up the younger seniors to the older seniors, because when you get to be 70 or 80, you're not as physically capable of doing things. So if you have somebody in the house sharing with you that can help with some of the day-to-day tasks, that's a benefit. You get some rent coming in, that's a benefit. The person that's renting, that's a benefit. It's everybody wins. Again, it's a small government. The only thing that somebody has to do is do that matchmaking.
Right.
And they're doing it because they serve seniors. But I think there's no reason that type of a program couldn't work across the board. You know, why 20-something couldn't be living with a 40-something, or whatever age group. It's not age specific. It's a concept that develops housing without having to build, without having to take over farmland to do sprawl. And it's infill. It's basically taking the facilities, the infrastructure that exists, and it takes better advantage of that.
Right.
So are those ideas that would work concurrently with because I know that the True North is looking into the tiny village model that has been spearheaded by Rogue Retreats in Medford and Grants Pass. They're also the county is pursuing a possible program for chronically homeless, mentally ill through No Place Like Home loan dollars. It's a loan program and not a grant. I thought it was a grant.
Oh wow! Wow, I did not know that either. Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, it's a loan.
It's all a sequence. So what I'm talking about is affordable housing for everybody.
Sure.
Which is developing more housing that is affordable for everybody, which will help to solve the homeless. What you're talking about are the important first steps for people that are homeless. And I think their Hope Village, I support their idea of a Hope Village. I think that's what they're calling it, Hope Village, where they need a piece of property, and they'll put in tiny houses, and these are unfinished, basically wooden structures, a step up from a tent. So there's a solid roof, and then centralized services where you have water, showers, basic services centralized, and then what they call wraparound services. So once you get people stabilized in a house, and their theory, and I agree, is home first. Get people in a home so that then they have a stable living environment and a short-term housing, and they can tap into the social services that are available, the mental health services, the substance use disorder that needs to be treated, and then they get stabilized in that short-term housing, and then they can transition into a more permanent long-term housing. And before that, the people that are just, it gets cold around here sometimes, and there's people living in tents. I feel so bad for these people that are on these cold days where I don't even want to go outside, but I have a warm house.
And they're all around us.
They're living in tents.
Yeah.
And so they're calling it Mission Possible, where they're expanding and building on the success.
Daphne's program at
I think that's an excellent idea. And 24-hour long-term emergency shelter. So you need to have the emergency shelter just to help people survive, because people die.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is unacceptable. And then you have people that are really trying that move into the Hope Village. And when they say home first, they mean, well, we're not expecting you to fix everything. You have a substance use disorder, whether it's a meth or alcohol, that they're going to give you housing you can't use on that property. whatever you do off the property is, is your life. But when you get back here, we're going to help you get straight. We're going to help you fix your life. And so those are also an example of incremental steps that have to happen. It's not one solution. It's multiple solutions that have to be added up. And it's that's sort of the puzzle. That's how my brain works, is here's the problem, and what are the multiple steps?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and even I'm sorry to interrupt, but even walking us through those multiple steps, you sort of point out the intersectional relationship of all of these issues. We start talking about affordable housing, and now we're talking about homeless services and things, because it all just sort of comes together like that.
Those are absolutely all connected. Mm-hmm. Other issues that are high on my list is I think everybody should have quality health care. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a big issue around here, and the state.
I want to get you we've gotten progressively farther away from the microphone, and there we go. Good.
Well, the state of California is looking at a program to provide health care for all. Mm-hmm. The governor's formed a commission to look at how to do that, and there will be some funding and some effort going toward that. Here's another example of where we need to make sure that we or rural representatives are at the table, so that when they're developing healthcare programs, they consider the special challenges that we have in rural areas. Mm-hmm. And we're actually quite fortunate here to have Sutter Hospital. There's other rural counties
don't have any.
They don't have anything. They don't have healthcare centers. They don't have ambulance service.
So the kinds of things that you want to make sure that they keep in their mind about rural places like us, like what specialists being referred to places outside of geographic. I mean, things that don't apply to people in the city.
Even baseline, if the state's going to manage a program and everybody's going to have access is not access if you don't have services.
Yeah.
So we can say everybody in the state has access, but if those services don't exist, and it probably will never happen that all the specialists will be in our county. Mm-hmm. The baseline services that we have are good, and frankly, I think the reason that Sutter Coast didn't downsize is because of the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. Because instead of serving people for free in the emergency rooms, now there's thousands more people in Del Norte County that have some level of health insurance, which allows them to keep in business.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it took some of the pressure off of having to find
to the extent that people have to
emergency.
Transfer out of the county for whatever kind of services, mm-hmm. I think the obvious step to consider is improved medical transportation services. Because again, with a high poverty rate, people don't have cars, they don't have money to travel. Make it easier and even in Klamath, is one of the things that I heard, that if you needed mental health services in Klamath, you have to come to Crescent City, even to get whatever there is.
To get food in Klamath, you have to come to Crescent City.
Well, thank you. That's another point that came up. There's no kind of market, and they call that a food desert, right?
It is a food desert.
Where people do not have access to good food. And so then transportation becomes a solution. Helping people in Klamath get to Crescent City for mental health service, helping people in general in the county to get to specialists and back, obviously.
Interesting. That is.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So this translates into, you were talking about people who don't have access to cars. This can translate into a whole host of other issues that are connected. One of them being, everybody talks about last chance grade, but also public transportation, how long it takes to get from Klamath to Crescent City on public transportation, the schedule, how many, all of those things. Do you think that what role would you say that the Board of Supervisors plays in maybe improving those services?
I think it's important across the board to recognize that most of our funding comes from outside of the county. So we can't solve all the problems here. And at every level, we need to have county staff be looking and aggressively pursuing state funding, the funding that's out there that can help. And Tamara Layton does a great job with transportation. There's no criticism of that at all, but it's a constant effort to try to bring that funding in.
Yeah.
And it's a strange thing to say, but because if the cost of running a service is one thing, but the Redwood Transit. I've read they have a hard time keeping drivers. They need to pay them more. You know, and that's also on my list is if we as a community can start paying people a higher wage, that's the bubble up effect, where the people that are working make more money. They will spend that money locally. They're not buying stock with it. They're going to buy groceries. They're going to be able to afford to buy gas. That money then gets inserted back into the economy, and everybody benefits. So even though if everybody was paying a $15 minimum wage, that would affect an individual business. But if you're in a restaurant, there would be more people out there that could afford to go out to eat. And that's the investment in the community that raises the economy, instead of constantly trying to cut back and saving pennies, where we can raise everybody up if we just start approaching it that way.
It seems like so few people are able to understand that too, just nationally as well. That if we spend on the less fortunate, the people who make the least amount of money, who partake the least in our economy, then the economy just gets bigger from the bottom up. It's the opposite of the trickle down.
Yeah,
And it just makes sense.
I like the phrase "bubble up."
Bubble
because
up is better, yeah.
That makes sense. Well, and when we're talking about living wage jobs, I've been endorsed by a number of unions, and I value that, because these labor unions represent hundreds of workers in this county, and these are people like the people that work at Safeway are union employees. They get a better wage. They get benefits compared to Walmart, where they are paid the least they can possibly be paid, and they're part-time, temporary, so they don't have to give them any benefits.
My grandmother retired from a job at Safeway in the 70s. Retired. A job that she'd had for decades as a checker, because of union and wages and living wages.
So one of the things I heard when I was interviewing with the construction trades, building and construction trades, is it happens when prevailing wage jobs happen in the county. Government has to pay prevailing wage for government-funded jobs. That sometimes the contractors are hired from outside the county. And while that, at some level, it makes sense to get the best, cheapest price, prevailing wage is prevailing wage. Everybody has to pay it.
Right.
It's not well enforced.
Nope.
And so sometimes when you have to pay prevailing wage, you don't get paid prevailing wage. So there's a need to monitor that more aggressively.
You also want to keep it local?
I think there's a benefit to having a preference. And that's the extension of the shop local strategy. If we're hiring local workers, local contractors, those are people that live in our community, that pay taxes, that buy things, that contribute to our economy. So we're taking this government money that's coming from federal government or the state government for building projects, and we're hiring people locally. That money stays local, and that helps our economy. Those are not complicated concepts, but they are not often paid attention to, and I think that's how we raise the economy in general, and specifically for the people that are working.
It is 5 minutes after 11 o'clock. You are tuned to Community Service with me, Paul Critz. Jessica Cejnar from the Wild Rivers Outpost is along for the ride today, and we're talking with Kevin Hendrick, candidate for the Board of Supervisors, Del Norte version, and District 5 specifically. Your thoughts, Martin v. Boise?
I don't even know what that is.
That's the Ninth Circuit from Boise. That's basically, it's why if you don't have a place for homeless people to go at night, you can't roust people from parks, from public places.
It says that it's unconstitutional if
I'm familiar with the case. I just didn't recognize the name.
Yeah, sorry.
I didn't realize there'd be a legal test today.
We'll
here's
get
the
to
thing.
Plessy Ferguson. in a
I
little bit.
totally failed it.
It seems like some people on the Board of Supervisors want to have a place. They want to round up the homeless people and have a place where they can be.
A staging area. That's what.
So then they can roust them from the parks. The motivation, at best, is unclear on that, and it doesn't really.
The motivation for which part?
for having a staging area, for having a place so you can say, we have a place, we meet the law, now we can kick people out of all the parks.
Okay, no. The staging area idea has been around for years, long before Martin v. Boise, and it comes out of the VFW work and Jerry Johnson here in town. And the staging area isn't so much like a concentration camp where they will stay. It was a place for them to come during the day to get clean, to leave their stuff, to interact with services like that. It wasn't an actual housing place. At least the idea. It may have changed and morphed and evolved into other things since then. And it wasn't so much having it wasn't the staging area, unless it's a place where people can stay, an inside shelter. Then I don't think that counts. For Martin v. Boise, you have to have shelter for people to go to, or you can't roust them. Right?
And I think, regardless of the law, that needs to be the goal.
Having shelter,
having places for people to go. It doesn't. If you're, and it keeps happening, and some of these camps become health issues.
Sure.
And that's a legitimate reason to break them up, even under that court case. And cities are doing that because this has become a health issue. We have to clean this up. But it doesn't solve the problem. You know, if you're going to roust people from one camp, they're not automatically housed because you took their stuff and kicked them out of camp. So the long-term solution has to continue to be developing more emergency shelter, more transitional or short-term housing. I've learned that the Hope Village, I called it transitional housing, and I was talking to a grant writer, and she said, we can't get funding for transitional housing. We can get funding for short-term housing. So use the right words, fit into the grant.
It just seems that the Board of Supervisors, since Martin v. Boise last year, has been more concerned. Certain voices on the Board of Supervisors have been more concerned with overturning Martin v. Boise than finding a solution and finding a way to come into compliance.
Well, and there's an
with
example of moving vehicles from one street to another doesn't solve the problem. Moving from one camp to the other doesn't solve the problem. We need to focus and identify solutions to the problem. And spending, and that's an external thing, that whether the county is a member of that effort to overturn it or not is a reasonable, rational thing to want to do. But is that where you want to put your effort? Is that where you want to spend
Well, and your
money?
$10,000, exactly. And that's what it cost to sign on this last year for to sign an amicus brief or whatever they were doing when there were attempts to overturn Martin v. Boise and Del Norte. And they would say we were asking for clarification. Yeah. But still, it was $10,000 spent out of the county coffers.
Yeah, which is a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly.
To most people.
Right. It wasn't like $10,000 only from the county. It was $5,000 from the county and $5,000 from the city.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a total of $10,000,
sure,
but it didn't just come from the county.
They both signed on. Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Please go ahead. I feel like I've been talking over you now.
No, you haven't.
No, don't fight.
Well, so I was just, I mean, this isn't really related to homeless, but it's one thing that's been kind of bugging me about kind of going back to Klamath and representing their interests. What is your thought on the dam removal project on the Klamath River? Is that something that you are in favor of, or you're not sure, or not in favor of, or concerned about, or what are your thoughts on that project?
I support removal of the Klamath dams.
Okay.
Number one, it was the choice of the utility.
Yes.
To do that.
Yes.
That they are the business. They made that choice. It was less expensive to remove the dams than to add the fish ladders that they would have to add to be relicensed. So let's start with that. That's the business decision. They want to do that. They decided to do that. So after that, then it's reasonable to look at what are the effects of that, and I think it's reasonable. There's been some discussion about possible effect of siltation on the mouth of the Klamath. I'm not sure there's enough evidence to convince me that that's going to affect the Crescent City Harbor, but it's reasonable for the Harbor District to ask that question. And if there was evidence that there would be impacts, then that's part of the project. You know, when you do any kind of project, you have to do mitigation. And that doesn't mean that you don't support the project. The project is better for fish which is better for the people that live in Klamath, both sports fishing and tribal fishing. There's no doubt in my mind that the salmon fishery will improve when those dams are removed. There are other concerns that can be discussed related to that, but yeah, I'm unequivocally in support of removing the dams, and I would maintain that position as a supervisor.
How about take us through your thinking on last chance grade? You're running against Bob Berkowitz. Bob Berkowitz came out of the gates initially with this whole thing where, Trump had said there's $1 trillion, it's going to be $1 trillion for infrastructure, and so Bob divided that $1 trillion up by the number of counties in the nation and came up with, we're going to get this much money, I'm going to go get it. And of course, nothing ever happened with that.
Because it wasn't real money.
Right.
Yeah, I was at the meeting, and Jerry Hemmingson looked at him and said,
yeah, I think I remember that
That's
quote, yeah.
he goes, "Well, that's just math. Yeah. It's not real money." Well, and this is why I've been really cautious in talking to people, because when you want to be elected, you're tempted to promise things to people. Mm-hmm. You're tempted to want to say things people want to hear. I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. When my opponent ran, he promised the last chance grade would be fixed in 5 years.
Yes, he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if people remember that, but they should.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he thought it was true at the time, but it wasn't. It was never possible. It was never a real thing, but it made people happy to hear it.
Yeah.
Oh, true that it could be fixed in 5 years?
There was no way
Yeah.
Right.
that it was going to be fixed in 5 years. And I've worked as an advocate. I've worked with advocates. I respect advocates that set the goal, the bar high.
Mm-hmm.
You ask for everything you can get, and you get everything you can get, and that's a strategy. But this is far beyond that. I mean, it was not even a possibility that it was going to happen. And then his approach to me seemed antagonistic toward the elected officials that could help us.
That was, yeah. I remember that feeling. Like, you're going to alienate all the people who are going to make all the decisions regarding last chance grade by coming charging into the room like that.
And there's a stakeholders committee that, with good people working on it, Jared Huffman, who is endorsing me, by the way. I mean, there's a reason Jared Huffman and Mike McGuire are endorsing me.
Okay. But I thought about this. I want to be fully transparent, too. You are the chairman of the Democratic committee here in Delaware County, so you don't really have to look those guys' numbers up in the phone book.
Well,
They know you. They work with you.
well,
right?
and same thing with Jim Wood.
Yeah.
And here's why it's good for Delaware County, whether or not I'm a Democrat. The state is run by Democrats. Mike McGuire works really hard to work with Republican senators to represent, because other rural areas have Republican senators. And we live in a mixed county. My strategy consistently, and not just because I'm running for election, is we need to all work together. I can work with Democrats, Republicans. I have people to the right of me, I have people to the left of me. I mean, there are more radical Democrats that I work with. There are more conservative Republicans.
Sure, but what I'm saying is you have a working relationship with these guys already.
Well, and there's
so
value
that's
to that.
something-
That's exactly right. They know me, and that means for Delaware County that when we need something, I have people that I can work with.
Right.
And that helps. That's good for all of us. When I, as a supervisor, will have a positive relationship with our senator and our assembly member and our congressman and even the governor. I mean, because I'm the chair of the committee, Gavin Newsom every year at the convention has a dinner for just the county chairs. It's like 50 people in a room with the governor.
Wow.
So over the years, and every dinner over the last 6 years, when I get a chance to talk to him, it's like rural. And to the point that his speeches now include discussions about rural counties. The state party has a rural platform now that is just the brand new, never had it before, identifying rural issues that everybody that's running that wants to be endorsed has to read it and has to pledge support for that.
Excellent.
So raising those and again, by identifying the issue, identifying the solution, and maintaining positive relationships. So there's tremendous value to having a positive relationship with our elected officials versus them not wanting to work with the incumbent.
Right. Right.
You burn a bridge, it tends to stay burned. So there's a huge benefit to our county. And I've talked to a lot of Republicans in this county that are supporting me. I had one guy, I ran into him in Safeway buying vegetables for my first reception. And he said, I'm a Republican and I never vote for Democrats, but I'm going to support you. And I, without skipping a beat, I said, well, would you like to make a donation? I swear,
this produce.
he pulled out his checkbook and wrote me a $99 check.
$99
in the produce aisle of Safeway, which did help to pay for half the food for the event.
Right on.
It was a win-win for me.
Well, then this makes me wonder, supervisor is supposed to be a nonpartisan position.
It is.
How important I know it is, but how important is party when you're in a position like a county supervisor that is nonpartisan?
Well, as I just said, being connected to the party that is in charge,
Right.
is good for our county, because when we need funding, because there's money coming for homelessness, there's money coming for affordable childcare. That state money needs to be brought into this county, and that doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't happen without advocacy. But when it comes down to day-to-day working with people, first of all, you got to be something. Bob's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. How's that working out for you? Bob is doing what he's doing. He thinks he's doing the right thing. I'll give him credit for that. He's a nice guy. But when it gets to the Board of Supervisors and when it comes to the community as a whole, we all need to work together. This is a small community. I consider all these people my neighbors. That's how I think about it. These are people that I'm not going to agree on everything. But when it comes down to these basic issues that I keep talking about, somebody said, well, affordable housing, health care, those are Democrat issues. It's like, well, why? Why are those Democrat issues?
Wow.
Those are issues that are important for everybody, all people. It doesn't matter what party you're from. In politics, people get confused. They think government is about politics, and I understand, because if you look at national government, it just seems so divided, and it is. We can do better here, and I think that I am able to work with people across the political spectrum, and I've proven that. For 20 years, I worked on the Solid Waste Management Authority. I worked with city council members and board of supervisors. That was my board. And every year it could be different people. And there were conservative Republicans, there were liberal Democrats. And for 20 years, as an at-will employee, I survived.
Yeah, good point. Right. Yeah.
I mean, at any point in my
Multiple.
employment, 3 votes and I'm gone, which bothered me a little bit at the beginning. And apparently I was prescient, because when I negotiated my contract, I negotiated a 3-month severance pay.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. It's like, this seems a little iffy at the beginning. And then I worried about it a little bit at the beginning, because 3 votes out of 5 and at any point. And then my only strategy is I'm not leaving till they make me, which is kind of how it ended up.
Well, yeah, sure,
When
but
they
you-
got 3 votes and said, yeah, well, you're done.
Well, 2 decades under that sort of.
But 20
Damocles
years,
like
I just figured the best plan for me is to work hard, do a good job, work with everybody. And so I had just a wealth of experience working with Democrats and Republicans and everything in between, or outside of that. And we made tremendous progress. We cleaned up the old landfill, which was a huge project.
It's a big deal, yeah.
We had to, before we did that, we had to develop and build a transfer station, which is just up the street, which is a good neighbor, I think. I mean, it's a good, clean, well-operated, designed to maximize recovery and avoid export of garbage. And we set up a modern recycling program. When I came here, people said, nobody's going to recycle in Delaware County. And they're not going to do it. And I came from somewhere else. I said, well, the rest of the world does this. I think we can figure it out. And it came to, here's an example. When the landfill had to close and we realized we had to start exporting garbage, I made a case for maximizing recovery, maximizing diversion, maximizing recycling. Why? Because it's good economics. As many things as we can pull out of our waste stream, we have less garbage to put in a truck to ship to a landfill far away. And that pure economics brought the Republicans, the Democrats, and and everybody together to realize that is just a smart plan. It's not a radical environmental idea to have less waste. And then we set it up so all the customers could benefit from that as well. So you can put your wood over there and your metal over there and your concrete in a pile and not pay the high garbage rate, and not put that in a truck and ship it to a landfill where it doesn't have to happen. So the point is, good policy is good policy. But implementing that policy requires both cooperation, collaboration on the Board of Supervisors, and it requires strong positive working relationship with our elected officials in the rest of California, because all the money that people pay taxes, they get that part. Then it goes to Washington, D.C., or it goes to Sacramento. Then our job, our staff's job, everybody's job, is to bring that money back in whatever way we can, in the form of nonprofit grants, in the form of government grants, even loans, Jessica, sometimes are helpful. And so, government is not about politics. Government is about serving the people, and that gets lost sometimes.
11:23 the time. Paul Critz with you, Community Service, the show. We're joined live in studio. Jessica Cejnar from the Wild Rivers Outpost, and a candidate for District 5, Delaware County Board of Supervisors, Kevin Hendricks. We're working toward wrapping up here in about 6-7 minutes. Anything that we haven't asked you that you'd like to share, like to get out, like to make sure it gets said?
Yeah. You haven't asked me about the fact that I played trumpet for the Tsunami Swing.
I just found out Jamie Yarborough plays Barry sax.
Yeah, he plays
sax.
I didn't even know that. I was thinking, everybody says they talk about things they do for the community, and one of the things I do is I perform with Tsunami Swing. We provide music to the community.
You weren't there the Thursday, though, were you? The gig at the when they were handing out all the instruments at the...
Well, I was at the second part of that, because the first part of that I was doing an interview with SEIU. So it's like, I'm sorry, but at the current point, politics come first. But the point I want to make
used to be about the music.
We
Kevin.
do have a gig tonight.
Okay.
At Enoteca.
Ooh, fun.
And it's a benefit for the high school music program, I think.
Nice.
And so the high school jazz band is playing.
Wow.
They're starting around 5:30, 5 o'clock. And then Tsunami Swing starts around 6:30. And then there's some surprise band. I don't know who they are. Another band happening after that.
That's fantastic.
So,
That's a lot of fun. If you have not seen Tsunami Swing, it's a kick. It really, really is. You guys are good.
And it's a small venue, so when we set up in Enoteca, we blow the roof off. It used to be the music comes first, and I still enjoy the music, and it's been a pleasure playing with Tsunami.
I guess, and just locally, I feel embarrassed to admit this, but it was just this last year that I finally put you and Jill together in my head. I didn't know you guys were married.
I love my wife, and I think she's always benefited in the controversial years when I worked for the Solid Waste Authority that she has a different last name.
I wish she could slide under.
And there are people, and I also sing with the North Coast Chorale.
Okay.
And she's the accompanist there. And I've been doing that for 8 years, I think.
Oh, wow.
And there's just people now realizing that because she's always on the piano in front, and I'm in the tenor section singing, and it's like, well, will you... In fact, somebody said, I saw you guys leaving together. I thought it was going to be and then I realized, oh, you're married. It's okay. So, small town, it's amazing. And sometimes, if you want somebody to know something in a small town, there's a couple people you can tell, everybody will know it.
Yeah, just
because it just goes whoosh, and it goes out there. And sometimes, and it's not a secret that we are, in fact, married.
Yeah, okay, good. I didn't want to, I'm not scooping anything, right?
No.
Do you have anything yet?
I do, actually. Okay. You mentioned 20 years as the Solid Waste Management Authority Director. As a county supervisor, you may be on the board, and with the way things are going in terms of recycling, the SB 1383, the new organics waste law. Ted Ward has talked about the possibility of maybe needing to go to mandatory trash service, but that's not something that people in Del Norte County have historically wanted. I mean, where do you see Del Norte County, the ability to recycle the state of trash, I guess, going?
It's Garbage company always wants mandatory collection. That's what they always come to. The Solid Waste Task Force years ago looked at how do we solve illegal dumping, and the conclusion was we need to let people be self-haulers, but they have to do one or the other. You can't do nothing. Early years when the first recycling mandate got passed, it set a 25% goal and then a 50% goal. Well, we went to, and West Chesbrough was on the board of the Integrated Waste Management Board. Well, I went to the Integrated Waste Management Board and we tried to help them understand this may be easy, it may be possible in urban areas, but in rural areas the economics just don't work. So we were able to get the law changed so that there was more flexibility for rural counties to meet the intent of the law without the specific goals of the law. I would approach the intent of organics recycling is good. Organics go into landfills, it creates greenhouse gases, that's where we started. And so the intent is to try to divert organics, food waste, and other degradable waste from landfills. But when I was there, we looked at the economics of composting programs. It doesn't pencil out. There's certain things that can't happen here. So I would, part of the problem, part of the solution would be to help the state understand that rural counties need to have more flexibility and possibly a lower goal. And the last thing I would remind people in the cities is that this county overall is a carbon sink.
Yeah, good point. Right, I never thought of that.
75% of the county's forest.
Right.
We have trees that are sucking up your carbon.
You're welcome. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
Good. Yeah.
So leave us alone.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a really, really good point.
I'm a thinker. I'm creative. And so,
Wow, yeah.
perspective.
So you're gonna
go
to
because
Sacramento
people have
with
complained about, we want to cut down the trees. Well, now we've got the trees standing. Let's make a point.
Yeah.
These trees are sucking up your carbon.
Wow.
And so
show up at Sacramento with a bill.
cut us.
Here's your carbon tax.
That would be a little more rude than I might tack that I might take,
Okay.
but I would make that point.
Yeah.
So
Just bring
we're-
them a bunch of numbers. I mean, this is how much a redwood tree, this is how much carbon a redwood tree takes in.
So you're talking about us spending money we can't afford to decrease X amount of carbon,
And we're already
when
doing
in
it.
fact we absorb. This county absorbs more carbon than we generate.
That
Sure.
is,
Period.
that is a wonderful. That's a. I'm going to spend a lot
There's
of time
my
thinking
closer.
about that.
All right.
That's a good. Yeah, that's a good one. Wow. That's neat. That's
You blew Paul's mind.
you blew.
Yeah, Paul.
You literally blew my mind. That does not happen in these interviews. Thank you, Kevin.
All right.
It is 11:30. Anything less? Okay. All right. You're tuned to KFUG Community Radio. Wow. Wow, man.
Wow, man.
You see?
Blew my mind.
We have been speaking for the last hour with Kevin Hendrick, who is seeking election to the Board of Supervisors here in Delaware County District 5, in which we are currently sitting. And it was an elucidating interview. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you both.
All right.